Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Queer Legends, an oral history podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Dearn, and this episode was an unexpected pleasure to put together. It's about a fierce queen who I looked up to as a young gay guy in Montreal in the early 1990s. I was still living in the closet in the suburbs while he was taking to the streets in New York City and in Montreal for the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, better known as ACT UP. And through fashion and design, he helped spread the word about what AIDS was doing to our community, and he led others to take action and to be seen and to be heard and to never take no for an answer. He did this with style and grace and with drag, and it was an inspiration to watch, first from my closet, and then in the streets myself not long after. His name is Blane Charles, and back then he went by Blane Mosley, and also had a couple nicknames, including the Chalk Queen, which we'll discuss, as well as Mocha Sheena. Blane has graced the pages of People magazine, Out Week, and newspapers across North America. He's walked runways in Paris and was a legend in the club scene on 2 continents. Montreal's Fugue magazine named him among their top 150 influential Montrealers, and his activism helped launch ACT UP Montreal, which informed the way Quebec activism has been done ever since. It is my real pleasure to introduce you to Blane Charles as he tells us how his rise to fabulous got started.
Well, I was born in Brooklyn in 1962, December 8th, and lived in East New York, Brooklyn, about 10 years. And then my mom and dad, because it was so bad back then, decided to have a house built in Charleston, South Carolina, because we would go down to Charleston for summer break. It was a great transition. So that was the first transition from East New York, Brooklyn to Charleston, South Carolina. Then fast forward 17, when I was finishing school, I moved back to New York because I was excommunicated from our Jehovah's Witness organization, which basically meant you were excommunicated from the community. And that's when that was my beginning of my self-discovery and finding myself and my self-worth. And I'm a 2-time suicide survivor. I'm also a rape survivor. So, dealing with all of that. I'm a motivational speaker. I've spoken, to high schools. And I've done the work, and that's why I'm able to speak. And I think that it's very important for us to share our stories, because when you share your story, that's how you empower other people who may be in the thick of it or just maybe still trying to deal with processing it. And part of the processing it is talking about it. And as an activist, I think that's important to also share these stories, because a lot of times that's the catalyst for us to become activists, is because we suffered so much and we want to make a difference. Also, we don't want to see other people suffer like we did. So there's a definite connection, I think, between the two. So, where was I at? 17, right. So 17, moving back to New York. I made my father pay for me to move back since they didn't want me around. And so my first 2 serious relationships ended because of AIDS. So definitely I felt disempowered on another level, and I wanted to make a difference and do something about that in honor of Richard Royal and Ralph Daniel. They're my first 2 partners. And so that's when I got involved with ACT UP New York in the 80s, early 80s. And then from that, I was able to really start feeling great about myself. I was what they call the Chalk Queen at the meetings.
I was going to ask you about that particular nickname, the Chalk Queen. You had a really fantastic point of view on ACT UP, and please continue, Madam Chalk Queen. So I went to my first meeting. I was at the time I was a model for Patricia Fields, and I had on like a denim jacket that was made out of pants that were turned upside down. So it was like a bolero jacket. So the legs were the sleeves and the jacket zipped up the crotch in the front. It was just like really cool. And then I had like these like Daisy Duke hot pants and these thigh-high boots. It was like I was from another planet, basically. And they were just loving it. Lesbians, the gays, everybody. Other people, they were all like, who is this person, And I was young and just like full of energy and very ambitious. And so they made an announcement that they needed someone to take notes for the meetings because the person who did it before had to, I think, was moving or
moving out of state or something. I can't remember now. It was so long ago. And I was the first person to raise my hand. And so we didn't have technology back then. So everything depended on me catching it and writing it on the board. So it was a challenging job, let me tell you, because when we get into those heated debates and like everybody's talking over each other and not raising their hand, and it was like, okay, but the thing that was really great about it was that the MC had my back, and so the MC would be like, "Everybody, shut up," and then there would give me time to like catch up and write things on the board. It was really cool.
You arguably had one of the most critical roles in all of ACT UP. I mean, you were the lens that was collecting all of these ideas, you know, and as well as presumably seeing how long did you do this job?
Oh my goodness, like at least I would say like 2-3 years.
So you must have seen so much change even within the organization. I mean, you're standing at the front of the room, and you know, people are dying, people are moving, people are
and then you know, we the old timers. As we got older, it was really refreshing to see all this young energy coming in, and we attracted a lot of young people. And it was just like, and they were the ones that kicked our butts into order, because, I mean, we were organized. If you look at the whole picture, I mean, ACT UP New York was really organized. That's why when we went to Montreal, we said, come and help us. But even within that, there's always room for improvement. And I always take my hats off to young people, because, you know,
well, you were part of the young people, weren't you? You were the young people, and I guess you had some older people managing your enthusiasm, I guess.
Yeah. Also enthusiasm, and also like, you know, wanting to figure out a way to get things done. And that's why I was on the art committee for all of the civil disobedience actions and stuff like that, because it was just like, okay, we have to step outside of our egos and step into a place of mission. And I think that's where the problem lied. People got too caught up in their egos instead of looking at the bigger picture. And also, as a Buddhist, I was able to already know the importance of having a vow or a mission, and how that would like help you to expand your life and step outside of your lesser self into your bigger self. So that was a very important lesson that I thought I brought to the table for us to succeed.
That bigger message, or sort of thinking of the group ahead of your ego, as you were getting to, that was part of the real energy of ACT UP. You didn't need to have consensus. You needed to have a plan, and you needed to have majority, and then get it done.
Right. We agreed to disagree many times. And, you know, and it was basically, it was interesting because I can tell you right now, I had so much respect for the lesbians, the Black lesbians, the Hispanic lesbians, because they were some of these straight white gay men. Well, I was like, okay, are we in the heterosexual society, or are we in the gay world, or where are we? Like, it was really ridiculous, some of the things that we had to fight and take a stand for within the group. You know what I mean?
How much of a problem was white privilege?
Oh, can we? That's a whole other story. That's why I said I always send my hats off to the minority groups and the women, because they really, I feel like they were the backbone for ACT UP, because they were the ones that really they were, you know, everybody of course had, you know, something to lose, or, you know, everybody was like fighting for something, but I felt like it's really critical for those communities, you know, the Latin, African American, Asian, and then the numbers also, because there were more white men in the group than the minorities. But that changed also, more minority influence and input. And it's so much that we split off and started, you know, we had like men of color, gay men of color, I forgot what the name of the group was, but like there was like these groups that would meet together before meeting with ACT UP. So they empowered themselves, and they got things done because they were really organized. And you know, there's power in numbers, as they say. So, yeah. And
at a certain point, folks were opening up ACT UP chapters all over the place, including in Montreal. How did you end up going to Montreal to help, or to? I mean, you went to live, but no more than help. But how did you transition there? And how was there a request? I've understood in some places there was Réaction SIDA or something, or another organization that asked ACT UP to say, "Come help us."
Absolutely. And I was at a position where I had nothing to stay in New York for. So for me, Montreal was a new chapter. For me, Montreal was a further extension of me finding myself and really expanding my life. So I took it on. I was just like, yeah, again, remember the ACT UP, I raised my first one to raise my hand. Again, first one to raise my hand, I'll go. And so it was go for a short amount of time and to get it going and then come back. But this is another interesting story. So, so I met someone, fell in love, moved in together. Then I had to go.
And that's here in Montreal.
Yeah. And then I'm a design consultant, so I do wardrobe and interiors and stuff like that. So I had a project that I had to go to LA and come back. And so I went away and I came back. And what I didn't know is that he had a stronger relationship with cocaine than with me, but it just got to the point where we just like, no, this is not going to work. And so he threw all my stuff out the window. His best friend became my best friend because he came over and got me. And that's how we were able to start this World Ball for Unity, because his best friend became my best friend, and we co-produced this big event that started the same year that the Black and Blue started. The World Ball for Unity and the Black and Blue were the two big events of the year. So that was a wonderful thing that came out of that. So we did that for 6 years before I moved to Paris.
While Black and Blue catered mostly to the gay, white, gym-going circuit party crowd, Montreal's World Ball for Unity was, according to the literature of the day, an opportunity for artists, designers, and performers to come together on a runway in celebration of difference and unity. So to find out why importing this Big Apple approach to AIDS activism works so well in Montreal, I contacted American author, screenwriter, activist, and AIDS historian Sarah Schulman for some insight. Her recent book, Let the Record Show, is a political history of ACT UP New York from 1987 to 1993, including the years that Blane was there. I reached her by phone.
There was no chapter that was as effective as New York. There were 148 chapters, but most of them were not able to achieve the kind of successes that New York achieved. So Montreal would not be any different than the other 147, except maybe ACT UP Paris. I'm not really sure. But, it's New York. It's like people are go-getters. They're very ambitious. They come from all over the world. They're driven people, a lot of very talented people. And they were fighting for their lives, and they knew what they needed, and they designed solutions. They weren't just asking for the government or pharma to change. They told them exactly how they wanted them to change. And they used nonviolent civil disobedience, which is a tradition from the Black civil rights movement.
Blane's World Ball paid tribute to the original balls of Harlem, which were catalysts in the evolution of liberation within the Black and Latin American gay communities. Just like ACT UP New York, Blane brought the sense of unity to Montreal, as well as to organizing gay activism.
Reaction Cedar requested that we come, and they saw what we did at the International AIDS Congrès.
The conference in 89.
And yeah, we did some really crazy stuff, but it was pretty empowering and pretty amazing. So
you're one of the early voices. Tell me about your initial involvement in ACT UP Montreal. Like, were you the first person to kick an office open, so to speak?
Michael and I were the catalyst for getting that off the ground. Well, I think we were meeting at his house and my house were the first meeting grounds for getting that all organized and getting it off the ground.
Do you remember how you met Michael?
We all met at the conference. I mean, that was amazing. It was just like, and we would go as ACT UP to support Reaction Cedar because it was their turf, their ground. So we were just their supporters. But we noticed a lot of problems, which we didn't say anything about. But when they did ask us to come and help them, that was just like, okay, great. So we don't have to say anything.
What were some of the problems that you noticed?
I mean, just like there was no order, everybody was talking over each other. There was no structure, having someone lead the discussion and you have to raise your hand. When that person's speaking, nobody can speak, just simple things like that. And then there was also this like infighting. So like, the leather contingency was always fighting with the drag queens and the gays were always fighting with the lesbians. And so there was all this inner fighting too, which I mean, also.
That wasn't a problem in New York though, was it?
No, well, okay. But also in New York, you didn't have, well, I guess you did have some bars that said no woman or no. Okay. But in Montreal, it was very like all the gays go to the bar, and no one else is allowed.
I remember that myself. Even when I was coming out at the exact same time, and I got to the bars, and I was like, "Where are all the women? Why can't my girlfriends come with me into the bars?"
And even like drag queens and the leather contingency had their own space, and they didn't want drag queens or any femmes or like.
What was ACT UP New York able to bring to Montreal in terms of knocking down some of those walls of resistance?
Well, interesting enough, I think that they were so, I think the most important thing and the powerful angle that we had was that we got shit done, and that's what they wanted to do. And they realized that they were harming their own community by not having a structure to get things done, because, things just kept getting worse in the community. So,
like there was no time for a committee. It's like people are dying. Go.
Right. Let's get that right. Yeah. And so one of the reasons why I started the World Ball for Unity with Luke is because that was a really perfect venue to bring people together to celebrate the diversity of our community. Because it was, I don't know if you know about house balls and voguing and all that, but it was based on the premise of the house ball, voguing balls in New York, which I was a part of. And what it entailed is the mother and father of a house, which is a group that you create, competing with other houses or families for trophies and categories, and you create categories. And so in this context, you get to celebrate every aspect of the community because you make a competition for everyone in the community. So there would be, a leather competition, there would be a femme competition, a butch competition, there would be a competition for femme realness, butch realness. I mean, so everybody was celebrated in the community. And
so even though everybody had their own individual, niche that they wanted, this World Ball was the spot for it to all coalesce under one roof.
Yeah. And so, like, if you had a house, the mother and the father of the house, so the mother of the house would be a transgender, and then the father of the house would be either a gay man or a transgender male. And then within that group or that house would be a representation of the community. So you'd have, a butch queen, a leather queen, a drag queen, so everybody was represented within each group. And then those groups competed against each other in the categories. So it's really, really great. So it was like, the special night where everybody came together and really applauded each other. Because, you see them perform and they would have these amazing performances and everybody would, applaud and clap. And it was just a wonderful, magical evening. And what that did was that it empowered the disenfranchised groups that were outcasts. So then all of a sudden now you have a group of, let's say, for example, a group of lesbians going to a gay bar and the owner saying, you cannot be here, you have to leave. And they sit at the bar and call the police to come, and the police come in and say, why are you saying they can't leave? There's no law saying that they can't be here. You know what I mean? So it was very like civil rights movement, but for the gay community.
We could use some more of that.
Yeah. Definitely.
Maybe let's just talk a bit about ACT UP Montreal. So you help them organize their sort of infrastructure, like in terms of...
Yes, and then die-ins and all of the different the big demonstrations that we did. The memorial, silent memorial march for the people that we had lost. We had these white masks that were made, and we all had white masks walking down the street. Some powerful. We got some powerful.
What did the society think of these things? Do you remember the public as you were doing these marches? What were people's faces looking like? Do you recall?
Well, the older onlookers, their faces were contorted until they looked really ugly. But but the younger viewers were totally supportive, and a lot of them joined us in the march. If we were doing interviews for the news, they would put the thumb up, or I felt like it was a new awakening for the community. Like I felt like they just needed a catalyst. So they just needed a spark to get the flame going. You know what I mean?
And you were part of that spark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your name doesn't get raised a lot. Why do you figure that is?
I'm sorry?
Your name hasn't come up a lot in the course of my research. And I also find that there's a lot of black activists who have sort of been erased from the queer histories. And I'm wondering, do you feel that that's a thing, or am I drawing too many conclusions?
No, that's interesting because I never thought about it. I just felt like, my participation ended early because I left.
You went off to go to Paris, yeah.
Yeah, the owners of the Queen came to New Year's performance at Cox, KOX. And that's the first time that we connected, and they saw my performance and they invited me.
I think that's probably where I saw you, because that was the very first gay bar that I ever went to. And I do recall you from old photos. I was like, girl, I remember seeing that girl.
I did the door. I
remember your fashion.
And I did, that was like a really great spot for me to like also just blossom, because I had the vodka bar. I had the cocksicles. I made these popsicles with vodka and Kool-Aid that were different colors, like, grape, lime, and whatever. And the funny thing about that was that the straight girls would bring their boyfriends because they loved partying with us, and they would buy a cocksucker for their boyfriends. And then by the end of the night, you knew all the straight boys who would suck cock because they had purple lips, they had green lips, they had red lips. It was so. And the owner of KOX was like, Blane, that was brilliant. Because what I did was I went to New York. I went to the Pink Pussycat Boutique in the West Village where they sold all the sex toys. And they had these like plastic penis molds. And I said, you know what? We got to do something with these. And they were about that big. They were just like the right size.
And then you went stalking straight boys.
Oh my God. I didn't have to. They came flocking to my bar. What are you talking about? It was amazing. I bought like 30 of them. And so it was a tedious job that we had to do I'd have to come in like, either I came in early before, I would come in early before the bar opened so that they had time to freeze. But it was just like, oh my God, like that was the talk of the town. Everybody knew about these cocksuckers at Blane's vodka bar. And then the other thing was, I wore like big platform shoes and all that. I never wore clothes. I always wore just a G-string and my hair and my makeup. So I was very androgynous and very like, Grace Jones, basically. That was my inspiration. So
I remember, girl. I remember.
David Shannon and Douglas Buckley were the ones that got me to. They didn't like me. They didn't tell me what to wear, but they were the ones that taught me that there's a drag for every occasion, and if you want to be effective in every occasion, you have to know which drag to wear for which occasion. I was just like, so I can't be in a halter top and Daisy Dukes all the time. And so I don't know if you saw me with the brim hat, with the jacket and the tie at one of our demonstrations. I mean, I was getting interviewed for the news, and you would think I was just coming from the office. It was great. It was fantastic.
I don't remember that, but I can honestly say that I remember seeing you when I was a young gay person. Like I was 19, 18, terrified, like lifeguarding out on the West Island. What? My first Pride was 1993, and it took me all the strength I had to get on the bus and go downtown and do that.
Wow.
But I remember seeing you out and around in the village, and I was both terrified of you, I think, but also incredibly inspired by you because you were able to do what it was you were doing, and you really didn't give a shit what anybody said or what anybody thought. And to me, when I saw you around in the village, we weren't in the same circles, but I knew you were there, and I knew you were fighting for me, and I knew that you were awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Getting verklempt.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, that was my coming out. Coming from the ostracized, dehumanized upbringing. It was just like it was wonderful because in Montreal totally embraced me. I mean, I felt so loved and welcomed there,
What a lovely spot to wrap things up. I'm honored that Blane agreed to share these stories. This is some important Canadian queer history. Blane Charles, Black, fashionista, activist, a personal inspiration to me, and definitely a queer legend. Thank you for listening. This episode was researched, recorded, and produced by me, Shawn Dearn. The executive producer is Ian Capstick. Coming up in episode 6 of Queer Legends and Oral History Podcast, the battle to create Montreal's AIDS memorial, known as the Parc de l'Espoir, or the Parc of Hope, and the untold story of how Montrealers nearly lost the park to city bulldozers in 2019. Queer Legends and Oral History Podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you go for great storytelling.